Ivana is the newest 5-star Soul Weaver coming to epicseven, and honestly, she looks very clearly designed to answer meta characters like Diene or Lady of the Scales. She brings cleansing, immunity, combat readiness push, damage reduction, immortality removal, and 2 brand new buffs called Ignore Sharing and Radiance. This is a lot. So today we're going to be going over how her kit works, what sort of teams she fits into, and whether Ivana is actually worth looking into. So let's start by actually talking about her stats and what to expect for Ivana, although honestly, if you want to take a look at the trailer, this is pretty crazy. So to start things off though, in terms of stats, Ivana is a Fire Soul Weaver with high speed and effect resistance. Her role is ideally in this case a mainly defensive support, but not in the usual just heal and cleanse type of way. She specifically looks like she's designed to cleanse your team, protect them with Radiance, counter Immortality, and again, put yourself with this when Immortality appears. But let's actually go into her kit, because there's a lot that you should actually know in terms of what to expect for her kit. So to start us off, let's start with skill 2. This is probably the most important skill and also the one that they highlighted first. First, Ivana is affected by combat readiness decrease, which, okay, already to start things off is pretty crazy. Then at the start of her turn, she dispels all immortality from all enemies, and this ignores effect resistance. Now, this is obviously clearly aimed at characters like Shepherd Diene, since she starts with immortality, but Ivana doesn't even need to land a normal strip or pass an effect resistance check. If she takes the turn, the immortality is just gone. That's it. The second part, however, is what I think makes this even more interesting though. At the end of someone's turn, if the enemy has immortality, Ivana activates her passive effect, which reads that she dispels all debuffs from all allies, and this means you can't restrict her or apply some nonsense to her, and she instead applies Radiance, which is a 50% damage reduction, while also increasing her own combat readiness by up to 50%. Now, just read this. Radiance looks pretty crazy by itself. It reads, when attacked, it's 50% damage reduction. It's also worth mentioning, however, that triggering offering from Lady can activate Ivana's S2, which is already very strong, especially when combined with her S3, which we'll talk about in a moment. So basically though, just from this skill 2 alone, into immortality based teams, Ivana is basically the boogeyman. She cleanses, protects her team, and this almost feels at the same tier, specifically for immortality or Diene type immortalities, akin to what someone like Aram did to Lidica back in the, or well, I guess at this point, a couple of years ago. Now, this actually leads us into her skill 3 though, which I think is probably one of the coolest other abilities that she has. She only has 3 anyways, but this is actually what allows your team to punish, again, these defensive setups. Her skill 3 is her main team support skill. Ivana dispels 2 debuffs from all allies, grants immunity for 2 turns, and grants Ignore Sharing for 3 turns, while increasing the team's combat readiness by up to 30%. Now, the immunity is especially important right now because of units like Perfumer Biblis being very meta and provoking, venoming, etc. But Biblis specifically is already quite annoying as she puts a lot of pressure on teams through debuffs, so having a cleanse into immunity, not just one, both, is actually quite impactful, and again, to me, reminds me a lot of back in the day, someone like Mediator Cowrick, who was equally as, I guess, anti-cleanse and quite strong for that reason. However, even despite this being very powerful, what I actually think is probably the strongest aspect of the skill 3 entirely, though, is this Ignore Sharing. This is a unique buff that now reads, of course, when attacking, ignore damage sharing effects. And this, of course, by name, allows you to ignore the damage share from these characters. Now, this mainly matters the most into characters like Lady of the Scales and Estelle, who can make it extremely annoying currently, even right now, to kill the target that you want. And now, normally, damage sharing makes your DPS lose a lot of pressure because part of their damage gets redirected, softened, whatever, and even characters like Strays sometimes struggle a bit. But with this, Ivana completely bypasses this, and again, this does let your damage dealer hit your intended target directly, though of course this doesn't stop you if you have to fight against characters like Boss Runka, or in most cases, if you have enough tankiness. It's not as though ignore damage share is the same as, well, it's a defense break, or it allows you to target whoever you want, which again, I think is pretty, well, healthy, I would say. It's not supposed to counter everything, like you'd probably expect, honestly, from a character released like a year ago. Now, when you combine this, though, with the cleanse, immunity, and 30% team push, obviously, this is a pretty loaded kit that you're seeing in general. This, again, helps your team recover. It protects them from follow-up debuffs, and it then also gives them a chance to move forward. Again, I brought up Mediator Cowrick, but this really does feel as if you gave Mediator Cowrick like the combat readiness push, and also, again, allowed him to be more meaningful in terms of the buffs that he gives to the team. Attack buff back in the day was really cool, and attack buffs were more rare. This is the sort of caliber that an attack buff, again, I felt like Mediator Cowrick, or the value that Mediator Cowrick gave from a cleanse and an immunity and an attack increase all in the same character. Only this is a new age sort of thing where now it's immunity, a cleanse, combat readiness, and this super, super unique buff. Now, her S1 is really, it's okay. It's about what you read. It's a heal, and it heals all allies based on the target's max HP, and with the soul burn, the healing is increased. Now, of course, obviously the S3 and the S2 are nice here, but I imagine that there are going to be players who do end up building Ivana not just to be fast, or not just to counter maybe like cleave or aggressive cleaves that have DN or scales. This can also probably be used in certain cases where you want to be slower, or if you want to get rid of anyone that has immortality in general. Again, though, whether this is like actually useful, if this ends up just being an S1 that you could pair with a character like, say, like an Afternoon Soak Flawn, so that you can one-shot, any of these are fine, but obviously this is just a heal. Now, in terms of the artifact, we should actually go over this. So this is Excommunicant Sensor, a very specific name, I guess, but this is also a pretty interesting artifact by itself too. This, of course, lets her take turns more consistently. The CR push already is pretty massive, and the condition is also less annoying than something like Soul Consolation, since Ivana basically just needs to be debuff free at the end of the enemy's turn, and it's not like you have to juggle between one arty or another, or you wish that you had one or the other while you're mid-combat. This is pretty generally usable. It gives you ER, of course, and again, the CR is pretty broad and versatile, and of course this gives you a decent amount of stat, though again I'm most happy, I would say, by the fact that you still get the combat readiness push. It's not like a 50% or 75% chance to activate. This is just guaranteed to push, but how much you push is determined based on the rank of the artifact. So now that we've actually gone through the kit, let's actually talk about where she fits, at least from where it looks in terms of draft. Now, Ivana definitely looks more like a counter pick than an early pick character, though this and most recommendations like this are usually turned on its head the second that we start talking about cleavers, but for a different topic. Okay, that said, this character, again, is not really the sort of character that I would imagine would basically pick every game, especially now that people are likely going to change a bit how they draft. I don't think people are going to just blindly take DN or some of these immortality characters without thinking twice. Her value obviously is highest when the enemy starts showing characters like DN, immortality, or damage sharing effects in general, and in these matchups, she can be extremely annoying, of course, because her S2 is direct punishment, while her S3, of course, lets you actually one-shot even from what you're seeing here on screen right now. That said, I do think that it is fair to kind of put Ivana in, or kind of categorize Ivana in your mind, kind of similar to where you may have put someone like a Dragon King Sharoon, or even like a Deathdealer Ray, maybe a little bit more in terms of the Sharoon direction, as again, it is just a bit fortunate right now that some of these strongest characters in the game happen to have immortality, but as we go further and along, it is not necessarily as though having her S2 passive is going to be strong every single time in every single lineup, though I would argue that there is pretty good versatile value in having ignore damage share, as this, or that ability, I should say, works in basically any composition that has to do with Aureus or has any damage share in general. So with this, though, I think her weaknesses are probably where I would consider her to be a bit more interesting. But again, in terms of strengths, I definitely think that you're going to be taking her, of course, into like what you're seeing here with the scales, and alongside characters that have some sort of immortality or have some sort of Aureus built into their kit. Now, again, in terms of weakness, though, this is the other side of the coin. Ivana is just obviously very matchup dependent. This is, I would say, a little bit unfair in terms of like a quote-unquote weakness. I do think this is the obvious, or it should be more phrased as, this is where you would obviously not pick Ivana. But again, this is less so about her being a bad pick or not worthwhile of a pick, as well, this is just not really what the point of this character is designed for. Realistically, again, she's only worth using when the enemy draft shows immortality or damage sharing. Outside of these, her kit, again, doesn't really do much for people. It's not like a huge amount of healing. Yes, she cleanses. Yes, she has immunity, and she has a CR push. But as a reactive character, these effects are not necessarily enough, especially when you consider a lot of the characters in the game, even characters like Sigrid. You see other Soul Weavers, or you have other, characters have Seal. They have some very specific niche they'll superhumanize, which makes her a bit more difficult to be used as a versatile broad pick, where otherwise, again, just like some of these other characters, being niche is fine. It just means that, again, you are niche and you need to be used in a specific matchup. Now, again, I do also want to say, though I don't suspect she'll be a flexible early pick, this will probably depend on, again, the way that people draft, or what people end up taking in the 1 to 3 slot before you're really determined, or before you've really determined what sort of draft you have here. With this, I think in a perfect world, she would probably be a counter pick, though, again, if you do end up drafting her into the wrong matchup, I would probably say she'll probably, or I think it's pretty fair to say she'll feel pretty underwhelming, though I've definitely been proved wrong by people that decide to play Cleave. I've seen people try all sorts of compositions. They'll try pre-banning or stealing all their counters and then playing all Revive while like pre-banning something like Briar and say Hades, for instance, or they'll get rid of any like anti-evasion and they'll pick 5 evasion characters. With this in mind, I think she's fine, and I think she definitely is a character that you should keep an eye out for. But let's actually now talk about build expectations for her. Though I get it, it's a bit early. However, I think from what we've seen just from the dev note and kind of what her goal is going to be in terms of kit, she's pretty straightforward and not super complicated, even in terms of build prediction. Ivana will probably want pretty high speed, roughly in that 270 plus range. The goal, I would imagine here, is either to cut DN or at least take her turn after her skill 3, so speed is likely going to be quite important. But after this, you're probably looking at roughly 100 to 200 ER after an artifact, plus a decent amount of bulk. Now, to be clear, she isn't damage focused at all, so you don't really need any other stats. And so the main goal here should just be to, of course, stay alive and actually take the turn. That said, her sets will likely therefore be speed alongside something like resist, HP, immunity, or potentially in some cases you may want to run her like counter or something slower. But even in terms of her imprint concentration, she even also has ER self-imprint, which can be quite nice, which does also allow you to, of course, spread your stats a bit differently, though her stats in general as a Soul Weaver Taurus are pretty good, honestly, if you're trying to reach that high speed actual threshold. Now, we should actually answer the most important question of all, and I get it, it's a bit early, but I still think it's fair to say if you are interested in Ivana, or if you're considering pulling for Ivana, honestly, she's likely going to be a character that you'll want to pick up. Now, even though, again, she's matchup dependent, the matchups that she answers are not just extremely common in high-level RTA and most arenas and guild wars and things of this nature. They're basically all over the place. Units like Shepherd DN, Immortality setups, and damage sharing are basically every single game that you can find, and Ivana gives you not just necessarily the coverage to prevent yourself from dealing with them, it gives you that safety of mind that if someone decides to pick super out of line, you have a direct way to punish them. This is of course a very specific matchup and a specific package that Ivana has, but again, since it does deal with some of the most common and annoying defensive tools in the meta, she's quite strong. So again, while she might not be something that you blindly first pick every game, this is kind of the equivalent to, well, having someone like a Bellion or an ML Arya against someone that decides to put 3 or 4 sort of books in the draft and you not having an answer to it. Now, again, I do want to say in top level RTA, just having these answers in your back pocket is very important. So if you care specifically about PvP and especially RTA, I definitely think that Ivana will be worth looking for or at least investing in. Otherwise, though, if you're a turn 2 in standard pull or a standard player, I think this is definitely going to be a must pull for you. If you're a low resource character, I definitely think she's nearing, if not actually on the must pull range. For cleave players, she's probably going to be a bit more niche. We'll have to see how cleave as a concept really evolves. I know that there are a lot of cleavers who use Shepherd of the Shepherd DN specifically to cleave, or some people will try and crutch on using Lady of the Scales to prevent yourself from getting one shot. But in any case, guys, Ivana isn't really super insane into every single composition, but because of how the meta specifically looks right now, I would imagine you're likely going to see her a ton, especially to counter some of the most popular picks in RTA, though I think naturally people are just going to pick differently. They're going to take the Biblis, who's also very still popular. They're going to be taking characters like the Nodos. They'll take something different, and with that, I think she will probably block out people from trying to play some of these other strong, very annoying picks. Otherwise, who knows? Maybe she'll be a pre-ban? We'll see in the future. Thanks again for watching, though, guys. I'll see you all next time. Stay safe, stay healthy. Good night.